Okay, here we are, week 3, and we're looking at social, environmental and economic performance. Okay, I'm going to try and get this in under half an hour, and we'll see how it goes. So, you can see over the corner there, the little diagram, people, planet, profit, and that is the first part of this session. So let's go on. Here are the questions I wanted you to think about. Why is operation performance important in any organisation? How should the operations function judge itself? What does top management expect from the operations function? What are the performance objectives of operations, and what are the internal and external benefits which derive from excelling in each of them? And how do operations performance objectives trade off against each other? So a series of questions there. It's fair to say that most of those questions address or are associated with the second part of the session. But the first part I think is really important and effectively becomes a contextual way of thinking about operations. So there's the transformation model as usual, and what we're interested in is the 4 Ds in the middle: design, direct design, deliver and develop. Here we go. So what we're addressing in this session are not strategy so much, the connection between strategy and the operations, in the sense that there's a context to all operations, and that's really what we're looking at in this session. So we'll start with the 3 Ps. The planet, it's the planet Earth, and the limited resources we have. And taking from an operations perspective, operations consume resources, and clearly resources are finite, and so from the point of view of operations, the consumption of resources is a consumption of a finite resource. People, operations employ people, impact upon people, serve customers, and what we're interested in with the P for people is the impact the operation will have on the quality of people's lives. And then profit. I think I argued in the session, and I stand by this, that for lots of organisations, profit pretty much is the main driving force, the big P of the 3 Ps, if you like. But it's still an important part of a view on sustainability, because without a return on investment, without operating within budget, so profit can be recast as operating within a budget if you're a public sector organisation or a third sector organisation. Without that, the organisation or the firm is going to just fail and disappear. So all 3 Ps are important. And as this diagram shows, they all interact. Okay, so there's 3 Ps. We're going to focus first on profit. From a profit perspective, well, we're interested in cost and revenue. So cost of producing products and services, and from an operations point of view, we're trying to drive those down. Revenue, from the effects of quality, speed, dependability and flexibility. So those 4 objectives will push up revenue, or help to push up revenue if we can maximise those. So we're looking to reduce profits and maximise revenue. Effectiveness of investment in operations resources. So to what extent will our investment decisions help us to improve in the operational indicators, the performance indicators that we're interested in, which are obviously quality, speed, dependability, flexibility and cost. Also, the risk and resilience of supply. Suppliers are an important part of of operations, and I will tackle that later on in the module. But at this stage, if supply fails, then the transformed resources will suddenly disappear, and if the transformed resources disappear, the operation ceases. Okay, so that's supply, and finally, building capabilities for the future. That's really about developing the operations so that it continues to be both competitive and if you recall back to the 4-stage model I talked about when I was talking about strategy, then it's about putting into place capabilities that shift the operation forwards and upwards along those 4 stages. Next we have the planet. This I regard as a major concern for all operations. I think in the past it's been a minor concern, if a concern at all. I think a lot of organisations are realising this is an important concern and are trying to address this in one way or another. So organisations consume materials, energy, they generate waste, and it's about either trying to reduce or minimise those inputs and outputs, waste is an output, or recycle them. Okay, so that's the first point there. Second one is reductions in transport-related energy, and the third one is reducing noise, pollution, fumes, emissions, those sort of things. Okay. Also, obsolescence. So I indicated the iPhone. I wonder how many of you have old phones sitting in cupboards or in drawers, or your parents have old phones sitting in cupboards and drawers. I know we do in our household, and that's because the mobile phones we have, and that for that matter, lots of other products we have a built-in obsolescence. Technology improves, so they become obsolete in that sense, but also they wear out, or they are replaced with slightly improved versions of the existing product, and therefore they become obsolete. And what do we do with the old products? Have they got some kind of recyclability built into them, but in any case, even if they are recyclable, they have still been consumed resources in order to be produced. So this is an issue and problem for organisations and for society at large. What else have got there? Environmental impact of process failure. So when things go wrong, this can have a major impact on the environment. It could be an escape of pollution into the environment, or something more basic like lots of quality failures create waste. And recovery to minimise the impact of failure. So what recovery processes are in place within the organisation or firm in order to recover from failures quickly and minimising the ecological impact. I talked about McDonald's and their attempt to reduce the deforestation, which is or at least was a major part of their part of the supply chain. Finally, I talked about people, the third P in the triple bottom line. So things like customer safety from products and services. You don't want services and products people to be injured in the enjoyment of services or the use of products. Employment impact on an operations location, rather. So societies or governments and local communities are very keen to have organisations locate in their location so that they can so that people are employed, and that employment brings wealth and well-being to the local community. Employment implications of outsourcing. So lots of organisations outsource services, outsource supply or production processes, and that outsourcing means that employment which was in a location disappears and goes somewhere elsewhere. Is that a good or bad thing? Well, it's bad for the people who live there, but good for the place where it's been outsourced. Repetitive and alienating work is a problem. People get bored, people get dissatisfied. It's not a great environment to work in. Staff safety and workplace stress are big issues in organisations, and exploitation in developing country suppliers can be a major issue. And I think Rama Plaza in Bangladesh, the collapse of the building there, many thousands of people were killed. It was a major disaster. But we in the West are still benefiting from cheap clothes and arguably are still exploiting manufacturers in all sorts of parts of the world. And something I pointed out was uncomfortable truth that you and I as consumers are, at least in a small way, complicit in this exploitation. And we can change that. We can change that by the way we shop, by the way we consume products and services. Okay. I also talked about Foxconn. Foxconn's a famous case of having to put suicide nets around their factories because the work environment was so stressful and so highly repetitive for the workers. They were driven amazingly. It was so awful that the workers were driven to suicide in some cases. Okay, then I moved on to think about operations and its contribution to strategy. So I use this little model here to look at five areas. So process efficiency reduces costs. So we're interested in process efficiency. Enhanced service secures revenues. So we're interested in improving services all the time. Reducing errors and better resilience leads to lower operational risk. In other words, lower risk of something going wrong, the operation having to stop or shut down or in some other way be disrupted. Okay. High capacity utilization leads to lower capital requirements. So if we can maximize our use of the capacity we have within the organization, within the operation, then we can reduce the amount we have to invest in new factories, new facilities. And the last one, opportunities for process learning. This is really about understanding processes, how they can be improved, and how that can lead to capabilities for future innovation. All this is centered around these five key objectives: quality, speed, dependability, flexibility, and cost. I talked about this last week. I'm going to now focus on these in quite substantially over the remainder of this session. These really are ways of understanding, of thinking about how the operation can be understood. Any operation, no matter what it is, can be understood in these five terms. Okay. Together, they lead to competitiveness. Again, if you're a public sector or third sector organisation, then these together will lead to maximum equity and maximum use of budget for society. Okay, so we can array them around a donut shape like this. And we have, for all of these, internal and external benefits. So I'm going to take you through each of these one by one. So quality is about internally error-free processes, which reduces the cost of making mistakes in service delivery or in production. For externally, it's about error-free products and services being delivered to customers. Okay, from the point of view of speed, speed is fast throughput within the production process or within the service delivery process, and for customers, it's about quick delivery of whatever services or products they desire. Okay, dependability is about internally is about a reliable operational process. Externally is about dependable delivery. Dependable delivery is about delivery being not necessarily fast, but being delivered when we expect it to be delivered. Okay, so it's subtly different from speed. Okay, flexibility is about internally is about the ability to change to meet changing demand. Okay, externally, it's about having new products and new services being delivered to us and having lots of choice as customers. And cost, internally, is about minimum cost, maximum value, which is efficiency, one of the 4 E's, or 3 E's, depending how you look at it. And externally is about having lowest price for highest value. So the same thing, really. Okay. Let's think about quality. I will address quality as a standalone lecture session later on in the module, but for now we'll just think about it in broad terms in terms of how it applies within the 5 key performance objectives of any operation. So quality can be seen as a specification of a product or service, and the example I gave was a farm which produces organic meat. The meat is specified as being organic. Okay, it may vary from one product to another, from one batch of meat to another batch, but it's all organic and specified as being organic. Quality can also be seen as conformance. It may not be to the same high standards as organic meat, but I think I use the example of McDonald's, but every burger or every meat product is exactly the same. So it conforms to a particular set of specifications and is the same every time, although that specification may be lower than quality as a specification of a product or service. Okay. So quality can have an impact on speed, cost, and dependability principally. And externally, it is about on-specification products and services for customers. So the internal benefits and the external benefits. I'll just talk briefly about the internal connections between quality and the other three there. So if quality mistakes are made, if errors are made within the production process, or errors are made in service production, then this can have an effect on all three of those in quite profound ways. So if you're making mistakes, say in a factory, errors are being made in production processes, and you're having a lot of waste and rework, then that is all an additional cost. It also means that you can't necessarily meet your delivery promises, which is dependability, and it also slows the whole process down, which is speed. So quality has a profound impact on the other three performance indicators there. Okay, I talked about quality for an organisation like Jaguar Land Rover. Jaguar Land Rover, they produce a premium product, which is a variety of Jaguar cars and Land Rover cars, and these attract a high premium price from customers. That is in terms of specification, but internally they're also interested in terms of quality as quality of conformance. So every vehicle of any particular model which leaves the factory has to meet the quality conformance requirements, so that when customers receive that product, they can be sure that it won't break down, that it won't have any problems, and also that the company can offer warranties with confidence that the vehicles won't break down. Okay, so all Jaguar S-types, for example, are exactly the same. They may look slightly different in terms of paint colour and specific specifications in terms of sat-navs and seat heaters and things like that, but in terms of the engineering of the car, they're exactly the same, one from the other. So that's both specification, all the little extras on it, and conformance, that in engineering terms, they're exactly the same. Okay, I talked about speed. This has a particular effect on cost and dependability. So speed means that helps with dependability. It means that we're more likely to be able to achieve our delivery promises, to process products when we think we're going to process them, if we have high speed. Speed also means a quick throughput of products or quick delivery of services, which reduces cost. So important to both those two indicators. For the customers, it means quick delivery. That if I order something from Amazon, in fact, I did order a product today from Amazon, and a game for my children, and I'm expecting that to arrive tomorrow. Okay, so that'll be quick delivery. Okay, so internal benefits and external benefits. I talked a bit about Tesco, or any supermarket for that matter, and speed. It's about throughput of products on the shelves, particularly perishable products. So perishable products go on the shelves, they can't hang around for too long, so they need to be replenished, but then customers expect those products to be available whenever they want them. Okay, here we go. So dependability has an impact internally on cost and speed. Dependability also is about, and principally has an external benefit to customers, in that it means that people have reliable delivery, and that's really the key dependable benefit. So there are internal benefits to dependability and external benefits. Dependability here is a good example. So for customers, dependability is about receiving or arriving, for example, for an appointment, and the appointment being kept. They're being staffed to see you or whatever. Not to have appointments cancelled. Internally, dependability is about having beds available, for example, when they're needed, about having deliveries made when required, or for different processes to be delivered when they're expected to be delivered. So people aren't waiting around for services to be delivered and becoming work in process. Okay, we'll talk about work in process later on in the module. So finally we've got flexibility. Flexibility internally has an impact on dependability, cost and speed. Something I should point out is that these can be internal benefits. They can also be where flexibilities, in particular with flexibility, they can create disbenefits for the other factors. So flexibility creates increased cost, for example, or it could make dependability more difficult, or it could create or slow down the production process because you're changing what the operation is doing. Externally, there are benefits from flexibility through new products, wide range of products and services, and in terms of, in particular, changes in volume and delivery requirements. So in terms of external benefits, flexibility, we talked about flexibility for a bus service. This is a bus in Birmingham going to Erdington or via Erdington. Anyway, so a bus service, for example, might have flexibility in terms of, in particular, changes in routes to meet different demands and changing demands, and flexibility internally in terms of drivers being able to switch between routes. That would be extremely useful to a bus service. So flexibility internally and externally would be both beneficial. Okay, finally I talked about cost. I treated cost slightly differently from the others. So cost is the cost of producing products and services. It's influenced by money factors, but two important sets of input costs are the 4 V's: volume, variety, variation and visibility. Particularly volume and variety, those are the key ones. Variation and visibility are also important, but the first two of those V's are crucial to operations. And in terms of the other 4 criteria, so all 4 have an internal effect on cost. Okay, I talked about the relative costs in terms of inputs to different operations. I looked at a hospital, and then I looked at an automotive plant. I compared that and contrast that with a bus service, and then with a supermarket. You can see there's contrast between those 4 different operations. This has implications for the operation. So where staff costs are very high, for example with a hospital and bus company, then if you're trying to reduce costs, staff are the areas where you look to reduce costs, maybe by automation or by reducing salaries or whatever. With bought-in materials, which might be a major cost for supermarkets and for automotive plants, then the key area to focus on in terms of reduction in cost is clearly reductions in products, the cost of products which are arriving from your suppliers. Okay, and that's where the focus is for those 2 types of organisation. Okay, so there we are. There they are again. So internal benefits occurring all over the place. Many of the indicators or objectives impacting on many of the others. Okay, and then of course external benefits. So some questions to reflect on in terms of performance objectives. What are the key relationships between them? How might you trade them off against each other? So given that some are more influential than others, and that maybe we can't be good at all these things, what are the trade-offs and what are the implications of those trade-offs? Okay, so in order to think about this, one of the common ways of techniques adopted within operations management are polar diagrams. And the polar diagram is something like this. You kind of sometimes called a spider diagram for reasons which become obvious. And what we have is you can array those objectives around each of those spokes in the diagram. Okay. So there we are. There's the 5 objectives, and there's a polar diagram. And we might look at where are the crucial elements for, say, a bus service. Dependability might be very high. Quality might be somewhere in the middle. Speed, relatively low. Cost, somewhere in the middle maybe. Flexibility, quite low. Contrast that with a taxi company or a taxi service where speed is much higher, quality might be higher, flexibility very high, dependability maybe a bit lower, you have to hang around for a taxi maybe, and cost. Well, I've got cost down there is quite low. I think taxis are actually quite expensive. So next time I do these slides, I might change that around and have cost of the bus service being a lot lower and cost of the taxi service being a lot higher. Okay, so this can be used in all sorts of contexts. So here we are. We've got those objectives, or some of those objectives, imagined for or understood in more of a contextual way for example, a police force. And we have a number of, you can think about how these might be understood in terms of objectives. So efficiency is cost, reassurance might be dependability, crime reduction and crime detection might be quality, working with criminal justice agencies might be speed. So there we go, we've got a number of things there. And they might say, well, this is where we want to be, and this is where we are now. This sets the strategic goals for shifting where they are now to where they want to be. Okay, and then you need to think. Then the police force would need to think about how it can achieve this change in objectives, and what that means operationally. Maybe it means fewer police out on the beat. Maybe it means more police out on the beat. I don't know. Maybe it means more detectives or fewer detectives. What does it mean for the operation? Okay, I'll go back to this one and just say that there is an alternate perspective on this, which is sometimes called the sandpile model, which is that you can build up the objectives one upon the other. So if you want to think about this more critically, well, here's a kind of the trade-offs is a view is kind of accepted, and certainly in some research I've been doing with one of my PhD students, we seem to be confirming that trade-offs do exist. But there is an alternative perspective on this, which you can find in the literature, which is called the sandpile or the sandcastle model, where you build one upon the other. I haven't really addressed it in these in this lecture, but if you want to read about that, I'd suggest you look in the literature. I've looked to put a paper on Canvas about that. Okay, so there we are. There's two alternative perspectives on the same thing, really. So we've returning to those questions. What is operations performance? Why is operations performance important in any organisation? Well, it's about how we deliver on the key objectives of the organisation. How can it judge itself? Well, operations can be judged in terms of speed, quality, flexibility, cost, and dependability. Okay, what does top management expect from the operations function? Well, it needs to understand its priorities, really. And then once those priorities are set, then it needs to, top management needs to think about how operations can achieve those priorities. What are the performance objectives of operations? And what are the internal and external benefits which derive from excelling in each of them? Talked about that in some detail. And how do operations performance objectives trade off against each other? And we'll discuss some of those. Okay, so next week we're looking at product and service design, an interesting topic, I think, which hopefully you'll find interesting, and try to look at chapters 3 and 4 in particular before we meet for the next lecture. Okay.